Kyle Bass, hedge fund expert in China hawk under consideration for senior role in Treasury or Defense. Date, January 28, 2025. Overview. Kyle Bass, a well-known hedge fund manager recognized for his critical perspective on China, is reportedly being considered for a senior position in either the U.S. Treasury or the Defense Department. This speculation is gaining traction amid anticipated policy shifts under the Trump administration, reflecting heightened concerns regarding China's economic practices and geopolitical strategies. Key insights. 1. Economic expertise. Bass has developed a reputation for his sharp insights into macroeconomic trends and his ability to forecast market movements. His investment strategies, particularly those that exploit geopolitical tensions, have garnered attention from investors and policymakers alike. This expertise positions him as a valuable asset for shaping economic policies that respond to evolving global dynamics. 2. Stance on China. Known as a China hawk, Bass has been vocal about his criticisms of the Chinese government, especially concerning its economic practices and military expansion. His views align with a growing bipartisan consensus in the U.S. that advocates for a tougher stance on China's influence and actions, particularly in light of rising tensions between the two countries. 3. Potential influence on policy. Should Bass be appointed, he is likely to play a pivotal role in formulating U.S. strategies around trade, investment, and national security. His recommendations could significantly impact the way the U.S. engages with China, focusing on protecting American economic interests and enhancing national security measures. Contextual background. Historical predictions. Bass has a track record of making accurate predictions about economic downturns, including warnings prior to the 2008 financial crisis and more recent concerns regarding China's economic stability. His ability to foresee market shifts adds to his credibility as a potential advisor on economic policy. Escalating U.S.-China tensions. The past few years have seen a notable increase in tensions between the U.S. and China, with heightened scrutiny on Chinese investments and trade policies. The U.S. government has been re-evaluating its economic relationships globally, particularly with adversarial nations. Current considerations. As of early 2025, discussions about Bass's possible appointment are ongoing, coinciding with broader efforts to reassess U.S. economic and security positions. The Biden administration's approach has been scrutinized, leading to calls for a more robust strategy vis-a-vis China. Analysis of sources. Bloomberg report. Bloomberg emphasizes the strategic necessity of appointing someone with Bass's background and expertise, highlighting the potential implications of his appointment on U.S. economic policy towards China. The article discusses the importance of a hardline stance in light of recent geopolitical developments. Yahoo Finance commentary. Yahoo Finance focuses on Bass's historical predictions and the economic rationale behind his views. The publication underscores the relevance of his investment strategies, which often align with prevailing economic issues, particularly those involving China. Investing.com perspective. Investing.com provides a broader market context, noting the speculative nature of discussions surrounding Bass's candidacy. The site acknowledges that while his expertise is valuable, no official appointments have been made yet. Conclusion. Kyle Bass's potential appointment to a senior role within the U.S. Treasury or Defense Department reflects a significant shift toward prioritizing economic integrity and national security in U.S. policy. His expertise and critical stance on China position him to play a crucial role in shaping future strategies that address the risks posed by adversarial states. As the situation evolves, the implications of his potential influence on U.S. economic and security policies could have far-reaching effects on both domestic and international fronts. Kyle Bass, a hedge fund manager with a reputation for being a China hawk, is being considered for a significant role in the U.S. Treasury or Defense Department, which could have profound implications for U.S. economic and security policies. The context of this consideration is crucial. It aligns with a broader shift in U.S. policy toward a more adversarial stance against China, reflecting bipartisan concerns over China's economic and military ambitions. Counterintuitive points. 1. Hedge fund manager transitioning to policymaking. It may seem unusual for a hedge fund manager to transition into a senior government role, especially in departments like Treasury or Defense, which traditionally rely on career civil servants and technocrats. However, Base's background in economic forecasting and macroeconomic trends positions him uniquely to influence policy in ways that traditional bureaucrats may not. This highlights a trend where financial expertise is increasingly valued in policymaking, particularly in areas involving economic security. 2. Bearish outlook leading to influence. While typically a bearish outlook in finance might be seen as a hindrance to career advancement, Base's critical view of China has become a valuable asset in the current political climate. His predictions of economic downturns and warnings about China's practices resonate with a growing faction in U.S. politics that sees a need for stronger stances against perceived threats. This suggests that in today's environment, being a contrarian on issues like China may enhance one's influence rather than diminish it. 3. Bipartisan consensus on China. It is somewhat counterintuitive that a figure like Base, known for his market-driven perspectives, aligns with a bipartisan consensus on China that transcends typical ideological divides. Historically, economic issues have often been viewed through a partisan lens, but the shared concern over China's economic practices has united various factions in the U.S., indicating a significant shift in how economic policy is approached. 4. Potential for increased economic intervention, if appointed. Base could advocate for more interventionist economic policies, which would be a departure from the traditional free market approach that has dominated U.S. economic policy for decades. This reflects a growing recognition that national security and economic interests are intertwined, challenging the notion that free markets alone can ensure national security. 5. Expertise versus political experience. Base's lack of traditional political experience may initially seem like a disadvantage for a senior government role. However, this could also be viewed as an advantage. His outsider status may allow him to propose bold, unconventional solutions that career politicians might shy away from. This perspective challenges the conventional belief that only seasoned politicians can effectively navigate the complexities of government. 6. Market movements versus policy decisions. There is an interesting dynamic at play where market movements and investor sentiment can significantly influence policy decisions. Base's history of making market predictions that align with potential shifts in U.S. policy towards China suggests that economic realities can drive political action in ways that may not be immediately obvious. This interplay underscores the idea that financial markets and political decision-making are increasingly interconnected. 7. Public perception and trust. The idea that a hedge fund manager could gain public trust in a role that influences national security and economic policy is counterintuitive, especially given the general skepticism of financial elites in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis. However, Base's track record of accurately predicting economic downturns may lend him a degree of credibility that other financial figures lack, suggesting that expertise can sometimes outweigh public sentiment against financial institutions. In summary, Kyle Base's potential appointment to a senior role within the U.S. government reflects a complex interplay of economic expertise, national security concerns, and the evolving relationship between the U.S. and China. His candidacy challenges traditional views on the qualifications needed for such positions and highlights the increasing integration of economic and security policies in contemporary governance. Kyle Base, a hedge fund manager with a reputation for his bearish outlook on China, is currently under consideration for a senior position in the U.S. Treasury or Defense Department. This potential appointment is significant as it could lead to a major shift in U.S. economic and security policy towards China, particularly amid increased tensions between the two nations. Key content overlooked. 1. Base's historical predictions. Many reports emphasize Base's bearish views on China and his macroeconomic expertise, but an important aspect that may be overlooked is the accuracy of his historical predictions. For example, Base was one of the few investors who foresaw the 2008 financial crisis, which lends credence to his views on economic vulnerabilities. His warnings about China's economic fragility, particularly in relation to its real estate sector and debt levels, are critical to understanding his perspective and may shape how U.S. policy addresses potential economic threats. 2. Bipartisan support for tougher China policies. While many articles mention the growing bipartisan concern over China, they often fail to highlight the extent to which these sentiments have evolved. The current political climate favors a hardline stance on China, transcending party lines. Base's appointment could symbolize a culmination of these bipartisan efforts, which may lead to more aggressive policies that not only address economic concerns but also reflect national security priorities. 3. Implications for U.S. global strategy. The potential influence Base could wield over U.S. strategies regarding trade and investment is significant. His views may not only impact economic policy but also redefine U.S. relationships with allies and adversaries in the context of global trade dynamics. If appointed, Base could advocate for policies that prioritize economic decoupling from China, which would have far-reaching implications for global supply chains and international economic relations. 4. Potential for increasing economic nationalism. The consideration of Base for a senior role underscores a trend towards economic nationalism in U.S. policy. His hawkish stance on China may encourage a broader movement towards protecting domestic industries from foreign competition, particularly in technology and manufacturing sectors. This could result in increased tariffs, stricter regulations on foreign investments, and a re-evaluation of trade agreements. 5. Base's investment strategies. While many sources focus on Base's political implications, his investment strategies provide insight into how he may approach policymaking. His history of capitalizing on geopolitical tensions suggests that he may advocate for policies that align with his economic interests. This raises questions about the intersection of financial motivations and public policy, highlighting the potential for conflicts of interest if he were to assume a government role. 6. Influence on financial markets. Base's appointment could have immediate effects on financial markets. His views and predictions have historically influenced investor sentiment, especially regarding China-related assets. His public statements could lead to heightened volatility in markets sensitive to U.S.-China relations, impacting everything from currency values to stock prices in sectors reliant on Chinese supply chains. 7. Long-term consequences of China policy. The significance of Base's potential role extends beyond immediate economic implications. A shift towards a more adversarial stance on China could lead to long-term geopolitical consequences, including a reconfiguration of alliances and increased military tensions in regions like the South China Sea. These outcomes could fundamentally alter the global order and the nature of international relations in the coming decades. Conclusion. Base's potential appointment to a senior role in the U.S. Treasury or Defense Department is a pivotal moment that could reshape U.S. economic and security policies toward China. Key aspects that are often overlooked, such as his historical predictions, the bipartisan support for tougher policies, and the implications for U.S. global strategy, are crucial for understanding the broader significance of this development. His influence could lead to an era of increased economic nationalism and have lasting effects on international relations and financial markets. 1. Base's economic expertise. Base has established himself as a significant figure in economic forecasting, particularly through his hedge fund strategies that respond to geopolitical developments. His insights, especially regarding the Chinese economy, have garnered attention for their predictive accuracy and thorough analysis. This expertise positions him as a potentially influential advisor in U.S. Treasury and defense roles where understanding macroeconomic trends is crucial for developing effective policies. 2. China hawk perspective. Base is widely recognized for his critical stance on China's government, particularly in relation to its economic practices and military ambitions. His views align with a growing bipartisan consensus in the U.S. that advocates for a tougher approach to China. This perspective is vital for any senior role he may assume, as it reflects the urgency of addressing the perceived threats posed by China's expanding influence on global trade and security. 3. Potential policy influence. Should Base be appointed to a senior government position, his influence could extend to shaping U.S. policies on trade, investment, and national security. His track record of advocating for policies that prioritize economic integrity and national security could lead to significant shifts in how the U.S. engages with China. This potential influence emphasizes the importance of appointing individuals with a strong understanding of geopolitical risks and economic resilience. 4. Contextual relevance. The discussions surrounding Base's potential appointment occur at a time of escalating tensions between the U.S. and China. As the U.S. reassesses its economic and security strategies, Base's insights may prove instrumental in navigating these complex dynamics. The interplay between economic policy and national security is increasingly critical, and Base's appointment could symbolize a broader strategic pivot towards prioritizing American interests in the face of global challenges. 1. Henry Paulson and the 2008 financial crisis. Henry Paulson, the former CEO of Goldman Sachs, was appointed Secretary of the Treasury under President George W. Bush during the 2008 financial crisis. His extensive background in finance and investment banking positioned him to take decisive actions to stabilize the U.S. economy, including the controversial Troubled Asset Relief Program (TARP) aimed at purchasing toxic assets from banks. Like Kyle Base, who has made predictions regarding economic downturns, Paulson's role was critical in shaping policies that directly responded to a national economic threat. 2. Robert Rubin and the 1990s economic policy. Robert Rubin served as Secretary of the Treasury during the Clinton administration and was a key architect of the economic policies that led to significant growth in the 1990s. He had a strong background in investment banking and was instrumental in implementing policies that promoted trade liberalization and fiscal discipline. Rubin's economic expertise and market-oriented views reflect a similar profile to Kyle Base, whose financial acumen and focus on economic resilience could influence U.S. policy towards China. 3. Michael Bloomberg and the response to the 2008 crisis. After serving as mayor of New York City, Michael Bloomberg became an influential figure in economic and financial discussions post-2008 crisis. As a billionaire businessman and founder of Bloomberg LP, he advocated for policies that addressed economic recovery, including financial regulation reforms. His experience in finance and analytics parallels Base's hedge fund background and positions him as a figure who could influence economic policy during times of financial uncertainty, much like the potential role Base could play in shaping U.S. economic strategies concerning China. Kyle Base, a well-known hedge fund manager with a critical stance on China, is emerging as a potential candidate for a senior position in either the U.S. Treasury or Defense Department. His appointment could have significant implications for U.S. economic and security strategies, particularly as relations with China remain tense. As we look ahead, several predictions can be made regarding the potential impact of Base's involvement in shaping U.S. policies. 1. Shift toward economic nationalism. Under Base's influence, the U.S. may adopt a more pronounced economic nationalism. This approach could involve stricter regulations on Chinese investments aimed at protecting U.S. industries from perceived unfair competition and intellectual property theft. A focus on reshoring manufacturing and increasing support for domestic industries could emerge as a priority, reflecting Base's advocacy for a tougher stance on China. 2. Increased scrutiny of Chinese corporations. If Base takes on a significant role, we could see heightened scrutiny of Chinese corporations operating in the U.S. The administration may implement more stringent requirements for transparency and compliance, particularly in sectors deemed critical to national security. This could lead to a wave of divestments from Chinese firms and a reassessment of existing partnerships. 3. Trade policy reassessment. BASE's expertise could prompt a comprehensive reassessment of U.S. trade policies, particularly those surrounding tariffs and trade agreements with China. Future policies might focus on reducing dependency on Chinese goods and fostering trade relationships with allied nations. This shift could lead to new trade agreements aimed at counterbalancing China's influence in the global market. 4. Focus on technological sovereignty. Technological competition will likely remain at the forefront of U.S.-China relations. Under BASE's guidance, the U.S. may prioritize technological sovereignty, investing heavily in domestic innovation and research in key areas such as artificial intelligence, semiconductors, and renewable energy. This could also involve curtailing the export of advanced technologies to China. 5. Strengthening alliances. A potential appointment of BASE could reinforce a strategy of strengthening alliances with other nations that are wary of China's expansionist policies. The U.S. may deepen its partnerships with countries in the Indo-Pacific region, leading to collaborative efforts in security, trade, and technology. Initiatives such as joint military exercises and intelligence sharing could become more commonplace. 6. Geopolitical tensions and military preparedness. With BASE's hawkish view on China, there may be an increased emphasis on military preparedness and deterrence strategies in the Indo-Pacific. The U.S. could enhance its military presence in the region, focusing on countering Chinese military expansion in contested areas such as the South China Sea. This might include greater investments in naval capabilities and defense systems. 7. Domestic economic implications. The push for a tougher stance on China could have mixed effects on the U.S. economy. While protecting certain industries may foster job growth in the short term, it could lead to increased costs for consumers and businesses reliant on Chinese imports. The administration may need to balance protectionist measures with the need to maintain economic growth and stability. 8. Political polarization and public sentiment. BASE's potential appointment could further polarize American politics, particularly if his policies are perceived as too aggressive. The public sentiment around U.S.-China relations is already fraught, and any drastic measures could provoke backlash from various sectors, including businesses that rely on trade with China. The administration may need to navigate these tensions carefully to maintain public support. 9. Long-term U.S.-China relations. Ultimately, BASE's influence could lead to a long-term deterioration in U.S.-China relations. His hawkish approach may solidify a narrative of competition rather than cooperation, making diplomatic engagements more challenging. This could have lasting implications for global trade, climate change initiatives, and other areas requiring international collaboration. Conclusion. Kyle Base's consideration for a senior role in the U.S. Treasury or Defense Department signals a possible shift in U.S. policy toward a more confrontational stance on China. His expertise and perspectives could shape a range of strategies aimed at protecting U.S. economic interests and enhancing national security. However, the implications of such policies will need careful consideration, as they could lead to increased geopolitical tensions and significant domestic economic impacts. The future landscape of U.S.-China relations will likely be defined by these developments in the coming years.